And the left is embracing this type of behavior.
We welcome Dinesh D'Souza.
I know I ticked him off. In a certain sense, it's a giant up yours to Obama, and that's why the left is freaking out over it.
Jack Kennedy and LBJ, Clinton, and the double standard from the left.
Yeah, I love how the left does nothing but push the most bizarre practices down our throats and up our tailpipes.
It takes a real man to tackle the hot issues that really matter.
Michael Hart is the man of this house.
Welcome to the Michael Hart Show.
Good morning. It is the 30th day of November 2018. It is a Friday, and we are together again. We've got a special program for you today. We're calling it our Situational Security Show. We have no idea what the long-term name is going to be because this is certainly something that we anticipate continuing in the future. As you guys are well aware, this is the Michael Hart Show on the Hart of America Talk Radio Network. But under the umbrella of Hart of America, we are going to expand out into some other realms as well. One of them is going to be related to unknown American history. We've talked about that so many times. But another one kind of came to mind about a month or so ago, believe it or not, in a dream. Yeah, it was in a dream. I'm laying in bed one night, and I'm thinking because there have been so many requests over the years from people since the original the Situational Security Summit that was done in Birmingham, Alabama, that we we're being asked to do it again. Now, this was back when the show was on a terrestrial tower. 4,500 people came out and visited with us on a Saturday morning, learning about how to handle a gun, what to do in an active shooter situation, what to do if you didn't have a weapon, the fight or flight response, first aid tactics, etc. Obviously, we can't cover that kind of information simply in a 1-hour broadcast, but we are going to start it off today. And the impetus for this was the shooting recently in Birmingham, Alabama at the Galleria shopping mall. And for those that might not know, and I realize in the state of Alabama, which is where we're broadcasting live from, the majority of you certainly are following the story. But as the program has grown, we're beginning to get a lot of attention, not only in other states, but internationally. We have a mall in Birmingham, Alabama. 2 young men get into a fight. One man draws a weapon and fires upon the other. There's an incidental fire or incidental shot that strikes a young girl. The assailant flees, but another man, presumably with the assailant, pulls a weapon. We don't know necessarily why, but local law enforcement shoots that person dead. Now we realize that the person that local law enforcement did in fact shoot was not the shooter himself. We don't know if the second person was involved or the person that was shot was involved in the altercation. This is an ongoing active investigation. We do know that the shooter has been apprehended in the state of Georgia, brought back to Alabama for trial as this case continues to unfold. But several different things occurred to me here, and I'm not going to get into the political aspects of it, but this is the reason that I wanted to assemble this panel today. Now, who we have with us today is Dan Wass, the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy, Destroying the Anti-Gun Narrative. Gregory Hopkins, a Time to Kill author, talking about Christian pacifism, and Beth Alcazar, who has penned a book. She also works for the United States Concealed Carry Association, Women's Handgun, and Self-Defense. This is not going to be necessarily a pro-Second Amendment program, although we are all pro-Second Amendment people. Because here's where it kind of hit me right between the eyes, so to speak. Here we have law enforcement. Whether or not they jumped too quickly or not is a debate for another day. But we do know as these events are unfolding in this very large mall that is populated on Thanksgiving evening, there have been multiple reports of people with concealed carry permits that began to draw their weapons. And I just can't help but think what a remarkable opportunity for even further disaster and tragedy that could have been. Here you have presumably dozens of people that have heard this gunshot, are attempting to respond to the gunshot, and I think we need to start having conversations as Second Amendment supporters, as gun carriers, as proponents of the Second Amendment, our responsibility in this situation? How do we respond if we know law enforcement is on site? How do we respond if we don't know if law enforcement's on site? And then you can even take it by extrapolation, if you will, and look at things like, a lot of the churches that I attend, has a very heavy police presence. Some churches don't have police officers, but there are armed congregants. Some of them are known, some of them might not be. So as we continue to defend our Second Amendment rights, which frankly I don't feel like need to be defended. They were defended 200 plus years ago. But as we continue to have those discussions, where do we come down as Second Amendment advocates in situations that could have escalated? I don't want to get into the politics of it. I don't want to break down the response of local law enforcement. I'm just looking at ways that as concealed carry personnel, if you will, we can keep from harming one another. This is our very first attempt to bring in multiple people at one time, so hang on tight. We are going to hope that the technology works the way we theorize it will. So let's go out to Dan Wass. Dan, are you there for me?
Hey, Michael. Hey, Beth. Hey, Greg. How are you guys?
Well, I brought you in first. I'm going right down the line, so hang tight. We're going to get Greg in here and see if this works. Greg, are you there?
I am here. Yes, sir.
Excellent. We got 2 out of 3. And let's go out to Beth Alcazar. All right. Let's see if Beth can hear us.
Yes, I can. Good morning, guys.
Excellent. So we've got everybody on board here. And what we're going to do is we're going to interrupt our regular commercial breaks throughout today's broadcast. We will do one at the bottom of the hour just to give everybody a chance to kind of reset and breathe. Now, for the listeners outside the area, Dan is calling us from New York. Beth and Greg are both local authors and experts. Greg also is a pastor that does a lot of work with concealed weapons. And one of the things that, Beth has an expertise in women. Guys, I just want to kind of free form this just a little bit and give us your thoughts. And I'm not going to go in any particular order because my main concern and my main issue here, and there's a couple different things. Greg, for example, I feel like even though the Hoover police were not 100% positive who the shooter was, I feel like the response was excessive. Reports say they didn't say anything to him about whether or not he should drop the weapon. And I know that in your book, A Time to Kill, you have always advocated for taking the minimal amount of force necessary to neutralize the situation. That does not seem to have occurred here. So let's start with your thoughts on that, and we'll just kind of move around the room.
Okay. I actually don't advocate for the minimal force necessary, but rather the reasonable force necessary. If you have a policy, for instance, in the police department that says officers will use minimum force, at all, to start out, you may not use enough force to save your own life or your partner's if you follow a policy like that. So carrying a firearm is for thinking people and people who have studied the law and understand the limits and the range of use of force that can be done. And so we have to be aware to use the proper force necessary with that.
So let's kind of toss this out there to each one of you. And what we'll do is, Beth, I want to start with you, and then we'll go to Dan and back to Greg. Imagine for 1 second, it doesn't have to be the Galleria, but for one moment, you are in a situation where shots have been fired. There is a very high likelihood that there are other people in this situation that are carrying. Beth, how do you respond to that situation? What is your immediate response? Do you draw out? Do you take cover? Do you assess the situation? How do you suggest that we act in that very first few seconds, knowing that the situation is unfolding?
Well, ultimately, I think this goes hand in hand with what Greg was mentioning. We have to think about reasonable force And if you do believe that shots have been fired, it would not be reasonable at that point if you don't see anything or observe anything that poses immediate danger to yourself. It doesn't make any sense to draw a weapon at that point. In fact, we have heard cases where people have heard such loud noises, assuming it was gunshots, and really it was just a loud noise. It was something falling. It was a clattering sound. And you have to make sure that your thinking processes are in order first. Now, if there are shots fired and you see and observe an attacker in your area, that would be a different story. Context is everything, obviously, when it comes to this. But I think one thing that I just want to put out there, even from the get-go, is that we have to understand that as responsibly armed Americans, with or without concealed carry permits, with or without open carry law, whatever the case may be, that's not a superhero cape. It's not some kind of obligation to use a firearm. It's not special permission, and it's certainly not entry into law enforcement. We can't run into our lives hoping to draw our weapons. We need to basically live as if the firearm is not there, and remember that it's a last resort, and that's a huge responsibility.
No, and I am delighted that you brought that up, because that was exactly where I was about to go, because I think so many times when we hear these stories of a shooting or a mugging or an attempted kidnapping or whatever, the concealed weapon carrier's response is often, and this may very well, and we're going to volley this over to Dan, may very well be where some of the anti-gun people get confused, Beth, is I think that there seems to be a notion that concealed weapon people consider themselves heroic characters, and that we, by default, are supposed to respond to these situations. And correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing from you is that weapon's primary purpose is to protect, us and the immediate people around us, or our loved ones that might be with us, and not necessarily to take on the situation as a whole. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. Yes, without a doubt. And we need to make sure that is being trained and that people are educated in that information. Again, I don't go anywhere different because I have a firearm, even with my training. I don't treat situations any different because I have a firearm. I still live my life as a mom. I'm a mom. I have kids. I'm a woman. I'm a wife. And I have to remember that it's not just about being physically safe, as Greg kind of alluded to as well. It's the legal and financial safety, as well as moral and ethical safety as well. We are not out there to assist law enforcement or become law enforcement as much as we're there to hopefully have an equalizer and an opportunity if someone directly impacts me or the loved ones with me.
We've also got Dan Wass with us today, the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy, the Destroying the Anti-Gun Narrative. Dan, do you think that people, kind of going back to what Beth just said and what Greg started, do you think that people on the left understand that for those of us that are responsible concealed weapon carriers, that we don't lead with our gun, but that our gun follows us? Because I think that there might be some notion out there that in their minds anyway, that we have adopted some kind of superhero status, or that we feel like we're the arbiters of Wild West lawlessness or whatever the case may be, and that misunderstanding might be a lot of the reason that there's so much angst in their viewpoints.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and I totally agree with Beth and Greg what they said. As a matter of fact, some very good points there. But yeah, so let me address that stuff. That's the stuff I like to dig into. That's the society view of gun ownership, and there, from the anti-gun people, a lot of the anti-gun radicals and things, they perpetuate this perception that gun owners are, recklessly and intentionally out there putting everyone in danger, looking for a fight, trying to create this Wild West. And the truth is the exact opposite. When you put a gun in your belt, excuse me, and you leave the house in the morning, your mindset is different. When you become a gun owner, specifically a concealed carrier, you understand that you have a different sense of responsibility now when you walk out of the house, and you also are very aware of what you're capable of. And this changes the way people think, and I've found that gun owners, concealed carriers specifically, are some of the most articulate, responsible, and respectable people that I've ever seen, because they understand their ability, their responsibility, and the idea that it's a reckless Wild West scenario is just something that's perpetrated. I know you don't want to get into politics, so I won't, but it is for political reasons, and that's why that narrative is out there. But the truth is the exact opposite. Gun owners are responsible, respectable, and most often very articulate and careful.
I don't disagree with that at all, and we often talk about training, and I know that, we are all familiar with Jan Morgan. Dan, you're a personal friend of Jan's as well, and we talk, and I've heard her speak so many times about the need for training and ongoing training and range time, and I think we all agree with that. But I want to go back, and we're going to go back to Greg for just a moment, because I know that in the book, Greg's book talks about Christian pacifism and what a myth that is, and how we have, a right and responsibility to protect ourselves as Christians. But he goes a little bit further, and I know that he gets into some emotional training. We can go to the range all day long. We can be a crack shot all day long. We can draw like Billy the Kid all day long. But if we're not having, and Beth alluded to this as well, she used the word intelligence, thinking. But there needs to be an emotional maturity here as well, because I can only imagine in the situation like occurred here in Birmingham, you're terrified. I mean, that's, quite frankly, I believe you had a cop on our hands that was terrified and, took extreme measures before fully assessing the situation. I can't put myself in this position, so I won't. But, Greg, let's start with you, and I'm going to follow it back up to Beth. I want your thoughts on how important training in the situation, the emotional situation is it every bit as important as the range time? Because it would certainly seem like it would be to me.
Oh, yeah. If you're a Christian and you decide to carry a gun and defend yourself, when a guy jumps out of an alley with a Bowie knife and says, your money or your life, that's not the time to have an argument with yourself about, is Jesus going to be okay if I blow this guy away? You have to decide that long before, and not only decide, but be settled in that idea. And see, what I do, folks out there, is I train people with carry permits and armed church security teams on the law. If you don't know what the law of your state says, then how in the world are you going to conduct yourself when you're in a situation like we had in this mall? Do you understand that every single state says if you aim at the bad guy and miss and hit a good guy, then you are both criminally and civilly liable? Oh, you see, we like to think about the laws that say, if I shoot the bad guy and he's proven to be the bad guy and I'm proven to be the good guy in court, then he can't sue me. Well, he can't. But if you miss that bad guy, or if you're carrying, say, jacketed bullets that pass through the bad guy and hit an 80-year-old woman, that 80-year-old woman is going to own you, and you may go to prison for it too. So we have to be both ethically and legally trained for what's going on around there. And there's another thought pattern we have to get into. When you're in a mall, for instance, Alabama has 22% of the population of Alabama, adult population, has carry permits. That means if you're in a crowd like that, we're taught about situational awareness. Oh, look for bad guys. Look for bad guys. But you are surrounded by good guys. Not only that, I know from my experience as a prosecutor, I would run in at Christmas time. I'd run into undercover cops at the mall. I go, hey, what you guys doing? They said, having a pretty good night. We just did a bump frisk on a 15-year-old. Took a 38 off of it. So not only do police increase their uniform presence in malls, They increase their undercover, plainclothes presence in crowds of any situation. So we have this entire thing. You have to be aware of your situation. It's like the realtors say, location, location, location. It's a different situational location if I'm in church or if I'm visiting my son's school than if I am at an open place with crowds like a Christmas time mall. I also have to be aware of the law so I can act reasonably and legally. I'll be judged by the standard of the ordinary, reasonable, prudent person under like or similar circumstances. I have to meet that standard in every state. And then finally, I have to know that I will not hesitate at the fatal moment, because hesitation could mean death or injury for the ones I love.
So we've established that, understanding, time at the range and learning the ins and outs and the intricacies and developing for lack of a better way of putting it, intimate relationship with our weapon is very important. And Greg, as you point out, understanding the law as well as your responsibilities and restrictions and rights also plays into it. And Beth, I want your thoughts about people just being trained. Is it important that they're trained for these type of situations at the range? Should we be having more conversations in our Second Amendment rallies about the need for not just responsible carrying and not just carrying where we understand, the limits of us, legally speaking, but we can talk all day long. You can be the greatest shot in the world at the range, but until it really happens, and my main focus here is what has occurred in Birmingham, because we do know, and those of us that are in the media, we've been talking amongst ourselves over the last several days, and this thing here could have gone any one of a number of different directions. Particularly if this young man, I know it was a tragedy, but I think there might have been a sense that the situation was neutralized at that point in time. But short of that knowledge, this had the possibility of becoming a full-fledged gunfire, although friendly fire. So if we need to learn about our weapon, and we also need to learn the legal limitations of our weapon, what other training, and should there be any? I mean, does the Constitution exonerate us from that training, or should we require people that carry to go through training for said situations?
Oh, those are some very loaded questions, and hopefully I can provide some thoughts to that. First and foremost, as an educator at heart and an educator for 2 decades now, I think training is of utmost importance. I think it needs to be the top of the list for anyone who decides to have a gun for home protection, self-protection, or even just for fun if they're involved with shooting sports. You need to be trained. And, of course, training to use the firearm proficiently and effectively as far as getting a good shot is fantastic. But what we really do need to see is more of the scenario-based situational training, and that means involving shoot houses or simunitions or specifically defensive firearms classes. And these types of classes can basically cover the types of issues we're struggling with, the legal issues, the financial issues, the moral issues, the ethical issues. And with that, kind of to summarize it, it gets people in the right mindset for carrying a gun for self-defense. We have to understand that it's a decision you make every single day. It's a huge responsibility, but mindset and situational awareness is really everything. That is the most important thing. You don't want to have trainers out there teaching their students that if they come across a bad guy with a gun, they need to draw and engage that target. It's the complete opposite. We really need to teach the avoid, escape, defend in that order every time. And that's something that you're going to pick up in these kinds of classes where, again, it's great to have your basic pistol. It's great to have marksmanship. But what's more important is that we understand what the body's natural responses are going to be under stress and train to those responses with a firearm.
So let me ask this question, and I'm not trying to be open-ended here. I want to give folks some answers, but I also want to speak to the anti-gun crowd to understand that we, as gun owners, also grapple with these issues? Because I think there's a sense, and Dan and I, when I was mentioning to Dan earlier, I think there's a sense that there's just a bunch of, jacked up, loaded up cowboys out there looking for a fight. And, I'm so delighted that I got you three together today because I'm hearing the emotion and the attention to detail and the thoughtfulness and the thinking that's gone into it. So, Beth, I'll just stay with you for just a moment. Let's assume a situation does break out, forgetting the crossfire and everything. In your opinion, and I want everybody's opinion on this, by the way, in your opinion, what responsibility do we as concealed weapons holders have to protecting others? Because, Beth, you touched on getting your backside out of there if the opportunity arises, and I don't disagree with that. But do we have a responsibility? And where does that responsibility begin? Is it a matter of imminent danger, or is it just going to be a personal decision?
Really, it's going to involve a lot of those things. For me, it's most definitely part of the legal ramifications, but it's also a very personal decision. My responsibility is to myself and to my family, and that comes first. If I am to encounter some kind of situation in which there is a madman or woman shooting people at random, I am going to want to escape that situation. That is my first instinct, and I have come to terms with that, and I have believed that that is the right thing for me to do because I want to be alive for my family, for my kids. I don't feel like it is my obligation, my responsibility, or something that's expected of me to take on an attacker. That is not my job. And I think that you'll find most concealed carry weapons permit holders are going to feel along the same lines. In fact, I've had several people come to my class where we teach basically the legal ramifications and we teach the basics of self-defense in the home or outside of the home. And I've had several people come up to me after class and say, I don't think I'm ready for this. I really don't think I should be carrying a gun. And I applaud that decision because it means they're really thinking through how serious it is and how much responsibility it is and how much they really have to think about it now and make those decisions before they ever encounter something. Of course, on the flip side of that, I want to understand their reasons and I want to help them get to the place where they can carry comfortably and with confidence. And again, realize that their obligation is to themselves and they need to be, at the end of the day, able to go to sleep with peace with whatever decision they come up with as far as what do I do in that scenario.
I find it fascinating that you're talking about making these decisions beforehand. You know, I mentioned yesterday or the day before that, I had a Marine friend of mine and as well as a professor from Auburn University who has since moved out west. The Lieutenant Colonel Stretch Dunn has since passed away, but they wrote a book called Professionalism Under Stress, where the entire context of the book was practicing life's situations, not just guns. I mean, the matter was if you are confronted with this set of stimuli, that instead of thinking about your response, it becomes automatic. And yeah. Dr. Dyson was very much, into personal training. Colonel Dunn was obviously brought the military perspective into it, but that the decisions, as you point out, Beth, were preordained, because I think that was one of the things that has been bothering me a little bit about the Galleria thing. Is the Galleria shooting is the shooting itself is tragic enough, but it's the response from the people that were there that, from what I'm understanding, we were seconds away from, possibly people that were not knowing what was going on, making decisions and behaving in a manner to protect themselves that could have been so dangerous to so many other people. And it's apparent that there were some people present that did not have the presence of mind to have already made those decisions. Greg, from a Christian perspective, do we have a responsibility? I want you to elaborate on what Beth says, because I want us, if what I'm hearing is correct, I want us to give people that carry weapons permission not to discharge those weapons, even if other weapons are being discharged. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be heroic if that is the last resort, but do we have a responsibility to protect people at the risk of our own lives only because we're carrying a weapon or because we're a Christian?
Yes. Psalm 144 says that I will praise the Lord because he traineth my hands for war. That means that God doesn't, like everything else in the Christian life, it is disciplined faith. And just as I don't walk up to a person I don't know on the street and start haranguing them about being saved, I have to have a tactical idea and a practical idea of how to use my firearm. And like Dirty Harry famously said, a man's got to know his limitations. And we need to know both our legal and personal limitations when we're trying to help people. I can't help people anymore. Maybe if they fall into a lake like I could when I was 20 years old and I spent 7 years lifeguarding. I don't have those physical abilities anymore. I have, even though I have an obligation, a moral obligation under Christ to help and aid people, sometimes I have to realize that I'm just not the person to do that right now. And that's where training comes in. That's why I train in my 6-hour course. I train people about the fight or flight reflex and what it does when that kicks in. The first thing that's going to happen is you're going to have the adrenaline release is going to cause trembling in your hands. That's going to cause a great degradation of your ability to place a bullet on target at any distance. People have to realize those kind of things, and that within seconds, that trembling is going to spread to your entire body. There are all kinds of things that are going to happen. Perceptions will change. Your ability to hear what's going on from other people around you is going to be severely limited. You're going to get tunnel vision on the person that's threatening you, and you have to realize that you might not see cops or someone else or even hear them identifying themselves as cops. And so when you are in these kind of situations, you have to remember that no one else can see your halo. Yeah, you don't have a white hat and, as Beth said, a Superman suit on that tells everybody that you're the good guy. You have to be able to understand and deal with these things before it happens.
Just real quickly, because I want to get to Dan, then we have to take a real quick break. But let me ask this question, and I'm going to ask it of Greg, and we can come back to the other side and ask it of Beth as well. But I think I understand her answer already. But I want to get Dan's thoughts also here in a moment. But Greg, if I'm a concealed carry holder, concealed carry or weapon holder, and I am, and I'm in one of these events, is it okay for me to run or hide or flee as opposed to draw my weapon, or do I have a responsibility to draw it at any cost?
No, you do not. Like Beth said, our first obligation is to God. Our second obligation is always to our spouse and kiddos. And God would rather have us around to teach and take care of and provide for those people. Our first obligation, especially if our family is with us, is to get them to safety. Those are the people we are legally and morally responsible for before we are responsible for anyone else.
Dan, before we take a break, we're having some very in-depth conversations here about the morality of gun ownership, the need for training, the need for responsible response. In your travels and dealing with the anti-gun narrative, I know so much of this has superimposed itself over the Second Amendment or constitutional rights. But do you think if more of the anti-gun crowd understood that there were people out there such as ourselves that are having these very intuitive, hopefully informative conversations, that we take it as seriously as we do you think they'd be a little less frightened by it?
Yeah, I think so. If they weren't so caught up in the political narrative, I think everything would be a lot different. And I got to say, some of the things that Greg just said were just so spot on. I was hoping to talk a little bit about that. He pretty much said everything I wanted to say, but let me just add a little bit to it. if the anti-gun crowd understood how gun owners and concealed carriers intellectually talk this stuff through like we're doing today, they would have a different perspective. They don't know that because they're never told that. They don't see us having these conversations. And what happens is and on the other hand, we can have these intellectual conversations and we can talk about we can imagine and we can hypothesize what's going to happen in a situation, how we're going to react. But Greg nailed it when he said, he talked about the fight or flight adrenaline dump. That's a serious thing, and you're right. You do start to shake. Your body changes. Everything changes in that moment. So aside from the intellectual conversations and the hypotheses that we create and that we talk about right now in the scenarios and things like that, we have to have we have to understand that the fine motor skills are going to be pretty much out the window. And Bill Dolan, who trains me, always tells me, use big basic functions. Like if you're not carrying with a round in the chamber, imagine you have a boxing glove on and just grab that rack and slide it. Your fine motor skills are going to be out the window. So, and also muscle memory is very important. That draw is important, and having that draw down to the point where you can do it in your sleep and you know exactly where your sights are going to end up, and you know exactly how quickly that gun's going to come out of your holster. All the muscle memory stuff is very important, and understanding the fine motor skills will be thrown out the window, and trying to train with the understanding that the adrenaline dump is going to be fierce. We've all had the adrenaline dump in other areas of our lives, and it does change. It physically changes you. So I guess understanding all that stuff is important. So back to the original question that you asked, Michael, if the anti-gunners understood and saw us having these conversations, they might take a different view of gun ownership, specifically with concealed carry.
Very well said. Guys, I want to take a real quick break, but we're having a conversation with Dan Watts, Gregory Hopkins, and Beth Alcazar. We're going to keep this up to about the top of the hour. When we come back to the other side, guys, I want you to tell the listeners a little bit more about what you do, about your books. By the way, you can go to heartofamerica.net. Go over to the shop tag, and you can pick up a copy of I've read all these guys' books, and it's great stuff. And it gives you a good idea of how not just defend gun rights, but how to defend yourself. Because we got to remember the gun itself is a tool. Let's stop focusing so much on the fact that it's a weapon. It's a tool for safety and security. In this situation, it was a tool that fortunately in Alabama did not have to be used by those that were assembled there. But responsibility means everything. Dan has written a wonderful book, and Gregory has, as well as Beth, and I've spoken at events with these guys also. So go to heartofamerica.net, or you can check it out at michaelhartshow.com. The books are at both of those locations. We come back on the other side. I want you guys to tell us, and I'll just go in order, a little bit more about what you do, about what you'll learn in your courses, and what you'll learn in your books. So y'all stick around. You're listening to the Michael Hart Show right here on the Hart of America Talk Radio Network. The Land Report, the magazine for the American landowner, is a proud supporter of the Michael Hart Show. Currently, they're offering an exclusive subscription price for listeners of the Michael Hart Show. So click on the subscribe button on landreport.com and enter the code HARTSHOW at checkout and receive a 1-year discount on America's #1 land magazine. You'll get a full year of the Land Report, which normally goes for $59, for only $15. That's a 75% savings off the cover price. Again, that's promo code HARTSHOW at checkout of thelandreport.com, and make sure to check out the Land Report on Facebook if you love land.
Is your home's crawl space making your... Let Alabama Water Management inspect your crawl space today. A wet, moldy crawl space can cause serious foundation problems. They are breeding grounds for disgusting odors, polluted air, potentially harmful allergens, and volatile organic compounds that can actually make breathing difficult and the air in your home very unhealthy. Don't take chances with your family's health. If your home has a crawl space, call Alabama Water Management today for a no-cost, no-obligation crawl space inspection.
Find Alabama Water Management on Facebook or on their website at ALAH2O.com.
It's the Michael Hart Show.
Come again?
The Michael Hart Show.
You know I don't speak Spanish. In English, please.
A liberal dose of conservatism.
How'd you do that? I'm not even mad. That's amazing.
Hart of America Network. Check out the website. Brand new website, by the way, heartofamerica.net. A big thank you to Tolly Williams from Liberty Tech for making that happen. He has just been such a great supporter of the program. The books of all three of our experts are up at the Michael Hart Show website or heartofamerica.net. But go over to the shop tab and you can click right through to their respective links, and they'll take you over to the website where you need to purchase the book. One of the great books and one of the great, the author of Women's Handgun and Self-Defense Fundamentals is Beth Alcazar. Beth, tell us a little bit more about the book and what you train. I guess it's primarily the ladies, but what you train, because I'm loving what I'm hearing from you today, and we definitely have to do this again. But tell us more about Women's Handgun and Self-Defense.
Yeah, sure thing. The book actually is our curriculum through the USCCA as one of our classes, and yeah, it is definitely specifically designed for women. It teaches the basics of pistol through intermediate and all the way through defensive pistol, again, specifically designed for women and the unique mindset and perspective that ladies bring to these classes. Technically, my title with the USCCA is Associate Editor, so I do have the honor and privilege of working with our Concealed Carry magazine. And I do also I teach classes. That's what I do kind of on the side from my job. I am definitely inundated with this industry. So I'm certified not only with the USCCA, but also through Sig Sauer Academy, ICE training, Draw School, ALICE, NRA, and the Well-Armed Woman. So I do try to offer a lot of classes specifically designed for women, especially because I am a mom. I'm a wife. I understand a lot of the perspectives and the issues or the struggles of even trying to conceal carry as a woman. But I also do teach a lot of classes specifically for defensive firearms or classes that allow people to understand, again, I'm not a lawyer, but we do teach classes through the USCCA that help people understand about concealed carry and home defense.
Very good. Greg Hopkins is the author of A Time to Kill, and I think one of the things that I have found the most interesting about some of his work, I've read that book as well. I've interviewed all three of these guys before, and I'm so delighted to have them here. But one of the things that Gregory had brought to my attention that I hadn't really considered before is the legal ramifications, not just of carrying, but when you're in this situation. Because we've been talking today about flight or fight, and we're going to talk a little bit about if you're not carrying here in just a moment. But I think if we're trembling, as Dan had pointed out, and you're scared and your adrenaline's really pumping up there, are you about to make a decision that could be life-altering? And one of the things that Greg talks about, in addition to many others, is the legalities of utilizing your weapon. Tell us about A Time to Kill, Greg.
This is a book, as I say, that is written by a Christian gun nut lawyer, me. And I didn't just intend, after 40 years of teaching the Bible, to give a purely theological viewpoint, but I meant for people to have something practical they could put in their hands and show that God's Word gives us practical choices and commands for real life. You know, God says that He commands us to defend the innocent, but with all legal force. It's not a matter of vengeance, and it's not a matter of just doing what I think is okay. It is always in the context of legal force. And so that's how I put it in the book. I also talk about Jesus and the military and police. The military were the police back then, and Jesus, nor any of his followers, ever told anyone to quit the military. I think it would help people with PTSD from combat to understand that God knows the difference between murder, which is the intentional, unlawful killing of a human being, and self-defense, or killing in combat, or killing in law enforcement. He blesses us for that. He blessed Abraham. He blessed David. He will bless us. And that also that Jesus didn't teach pacifism. I show turn the other cheek, live by the sword, die by the sword, from the biblical standpoint that they have, and also that Jesus taught home defense and defense of property on every occasion that he had a chance to do that, and not once when he had a chance to preach pacifism did he do so. It's a totally man-made thing. So God's word, whatever it is, it applies to us today, and and so that's one of the reasons why as I used to teach Huntsville police as a city prosecutor, use of force, I now teach civilians in a 6-hour class of how to judiciously use force in Alabama. And I want to say that Beth's book is fantastic. Even if you're a man, you can learn from this book. It's got great illustrations. She thinks about a lot of basic things that are baffling to people new to guns, that she answers those questions that a lot of us who have been in it so long, we just kind of skip over, because that was something we dealt with a long time ago. Beth gets down to the basics and works you from there to proficiency. That this is a book that every family can profit from. And I can't say enough about her book or Dan's books. Dan is one of the best thinkers in the firearm movements that if not the best, that I have ever run into. He understands the duty of persuasion. He's just not talking to the converted. He's actually reaching out to the anti-gunners out there and showing you and me how to reach out to them. And he does it in such a clear and logical way. I can't say enough about how much good either Beth or Dan's work will do you.
So Dan, let's talk a little bit about that, because that's quite an endorsement. But I want to ask you a question, because you and I have talked about this on the air and off the air so many times, and it's going to kind of set up the next segment, because we've got about 10, 12 minutes left in today's broadcast. And first off, let me thank you guys, because I was contemplating whether or not I wanted to make this into a standalone weekly program. We could talk about safety issues. I think I've made my decision. It's going to be an absolute yes. And so I appreciate the professionalism and insight that you guys have brought. But Dan, let me ask you a question, and then I want to go back to Beth, because I think she's going to have some good insights on this. You and I have talked about this in the past. You're the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy, Destroying the Anti-Gun Narrative. Tell us a little bit about the book, and then I got a question for you.
Well, first, Greg, thank you so much for that endorsement. I really appreciate that. My Good Gun, Bad Guy, Behind the Lies of the Anti-Gun Radical is the first book in the series. And what I do is I expose the lies, strategies, and tactics of the anti-gun side of this conversation. And what I try to do is show people when their strategies are being used, what terminology they're using, and how they influence the overall narrative or the overall landscape of the gun conversation in the public forum. And they have very powerful and articulate, strategic ways of doing this that we don't always notice. Things, the way they use certain terms, the way they speak, the way they ask questions, and the way they do all sorts of stuff. It manipulates the thought process of people, and it changes the way we think about guns in society. So I expose all that stuff because I'm I was somehow able to start to see some of the things that they were doing, and the more I researched it and the more I looked into it, the more a lot of this stuff just became so blatantly clear to me. So that's my that's kind of my niche, I guess, if you want to call it that. And then Good Gun, Bad Guy 2, Destroying the Anti-Gun Narrative, gets more into the media and how the media plays a role in the way we think about guns.
So let me ask this question, and then we're going to go up to Beth. The books both defend our Second Amendment rights and the right to carry guns, et cetera, et cetera. But do they make an argument for carrying? And what I'm asking, before you answer, and this is going to be the question to Beth, so I'll go ahead and give her a little peek. It'll be an open book test, and I already know what the answer is going to be, I feel. But should everyone carry? Because in this crazy world we live in today, I think a lot of times people that are anti-gun, and again, let's keep this as political free as we can, think that people that do carry think that everybody should carry. So I'm asking you, Dan, should everybody carry? Is that what the books are trying to sell us on?
No, I don't think everybody should carry. There's people that are inclined to carry and people that aren't. But you brought up a great topic, because this is where the anti-gun people, the anti-gun crowd, the anti-gun radicals will say that we gun owners want everybody to carry. We want to pass the guns out to all the faculty in the schools, and that couldn't be further from the truth. But that you brought up a narrative that they create. So a lot of people think that. A lot of people think that us gun owners want everybody to carry, when the truth is we understand psychology enough to know that some people just aren't inclined. Some people shouldn't. And we don't endorse everyone carrying. No, it's a ridiculous notion that they perpetuate, and it's a notion designed to tarnish the gun community.
So, Beth, I would have to assume that anybody that carried because they thought they were supposed to, or they carried without getting proper training, or they carried without thinking about scenarios, or they carried because they want to be a hero, or they think it's hot and sexy to carry a weapon on their hip, but they refuse to do any of the deep thought training and the range time. I would think that person is as dangerous, or potentially as dangerous, as somebody that goes out intentionally meaning harm.
I don't know if they're as dangerous, but I think they're definitely they definitely could pose a problem, just because they could make decisions that they are going to regret for the rest of their lives. And ultimately, that's what it boils down to when we're thinking about protecting ourselves, especially if we're thinking about wanting to have a firearm for protection. We've got to ask some questions. We've got to ask, if we're going to use that firearm, is it worth going to jail over? Right. Is it worth killing over? And is it worth dying over? And if you can't answer yes to those questions, then you have some come to Jesus meetings or some serious self-thought and consideration to go through, because it's awesome and incredible that as Americans we have this protected natural right of self-defense. I think every human being has the right to self-defense, without a shadow of a doubt. But uniquely American is that we have this protected right that the Constitution and the Second Amendment basically say government is not allowed to touch. They're not allowed to chip away. They're not allowed to infringe. But with that right, and I hate to quote Spider-Man, but it comes with great responsibility. And we each have to make that very, very important personal decision. And I said it earlier, it's a daily decision to carry that firearm. Yep. And if we don't feel like we're ready, then we need to do what it takes so that we can be ready physically, financially, legally, morally, and ethically.
Very well stated. Guys, I'm getting very tight on time, so what I want to do is I want to ask one last question. I'm going to go right down the line, and we are going to start with you, Beth. And then as soon as we respond to this, I want to go back through the group one more time and tell the listeners how they can find out more about you, your programs, books, et cetera. And I realize that I'm asking a question that we all might not be qualified to speak to, but I want your opinion on it, because I know that y'all are very thoughtful. You've looked through this situation, and we don't want people that are going to carry a weapon that are fearful of them or that might have a predisposition not to use them in a responsible and a judicious manner. With that said, let's assume for one moment and again, we'll start with Beth, that we are in a situation that we have an active shooter. It is not just an active shooter on a college campus that might be blocks, even a mile away, but one where we are in close proximity, like what happened in Birmingham. This happens, just so everybody understands, at the upper crosswalk, not too far from the food court on Thanksgiving night. The place was packed. Now, I know a lot of people don't want to carry, that are fearful of carrying, whatever the reason, and if you are, for God's sakes, don't carry. But if you are against weapons and for whatever the reason you are unarmed, Beth, and one of these situations occurs, how, in your opinion, should someone that is not carrying a weapon respond in an active shooter situation?
I think we can go with what we've heard nationally across the board and from a lot of different organizations, is to consider the simplicity and yet also the effectiveness of the run, hide, fight. Run if you're not safe, or move with purpose to find somewhere that you can either escape the situation or get cover. Hide if you can, if it is a safe place, or fight when there's no other option. You can use anything to disorient, distract, disarm, deter, or defend. And that was a lot of D words, but all of them are possible with or without a firearm.
Greg, your thoughts?
You should always carry a non-lethal weapon, number one. I always carry pepper spray. If a person is close enough, you might be able to do that. Another thing is to be aware of environmental weapons. For instance, in your office, we talk about, sometimes we have workplace killers. A good thing to know would be look around your office and look at heavy staplers, fire extinguishers, large books, and think about, or your coffee cup, and say, that would hurt. And be aware that you can use those kind of things. Another thing is to be aware. Most people don't know the difference between cover and concealment. If you are under concealment, the bad guy cannot see you, at least temporarily, but he can shoot through that mannequin you're trying to hide behind. If you're behind cover, that you're behind something that cannot be shot through. So if you can't move, if you can't run, there's a lot of stone and other things, and that stone is often wrapping steel. Get behind something like that until the killer is distracted and you can make a break for it and run. All of those things I'd recommend.
Very good. Dan, what are your thoughts on if we are not armed, we're not willing to be armed, we're in an active shooter situation, maybe even in close proximity, how do we respond? Is there anything that we can do in addition to what Beth and Greg have suggested?
Well, no, what they suggested is great. Run, hide, fight, pepper spray, a knife, anything that you can carry to defend yourself is all good. But the thing that frustrates me the most is that first of all, I'm very situationally aware. And, you can ask my wife. We go into a restaurant, and she knows that I need to sit where I need to sit. And she's okay with that because I need to see the room. I need to know what's going on. And most gun owners will understand that. But what frustrates me the most is people who are completely delusional, or completely unaware, rather, of their surroundings, whether they got their face in their phone or whether they're doing whatever, and they just have no clue. Yeah, so that's the first step is start to learn a little bit more about situational awareness and get good with that. Because here's the thing, and here's the ironic thing about the anti-gun people. If there was a situation like you're talking about, you're in a mall or whatever, and a shooter comes in and he demands everybody get down on the floor and he starts killing people and creating havoc, that the anti-gun person, the person who's rallied against guns their whole life, while they're laying on the floor, crying, begging, and praying for their life, guess who just became their new best friend? It's the guy or girl with the gun. And I think that just to make that point is enough. Situational awareness, consider carrying a firearm if you're inclined to do so, and understand that there are good people around you who are there, who can take care of business if the need should arise.
Well, I want to before we go through where we can find out more about you guys. I do want to double down on what you just said, Dan, because today's program has been because it was inspired by what happened in Birmingham, Alabama. But today's program has been about situational awareness as it relates to an active shooter. But it does apply everywhere. Some months ago, I was when this program was on the terrestrial tower, I was heading back to my home, which is in the club district back in the day in downtown Birmingham, and it's late at night. It's 9:30, 10 o'clock at night because I was on the evening shift at that point in time. Come to a traffic light, and a white sedan pulls up next to me, blaring music. The windows are all blacked out. Don't think for one moment I did not notice this car. And for somebody that makes their living very oftentimes poking the bear, I was very aware of that. And whenever I come to a traffic light, no matter where I am paying attention to the car to my left or to my right. When I park at the mall, am I parking under, a lighted area? Is it if it's dusk and it's going to be dark when I come out? Pay attention to the lighting when you come out. Pay attention to somebody that might be in their car when you walk in and you walk out and they're still in their car. And so and particularly during the Christmas season, open trunks and open hoods and people that seem to be loitering around. It's not just a matter of being in the mall and something going down, because the thing is, if we are aware, and Dan, I really appreciate you pointing out the phone thing. We are so distracted by everything, and before you know it, somebody's getting mugged or worse because they didn't see a very suspicious character right there in front of them. So Beth has been pretty much all morning long about not putting yourself in a situation where you're going to have to deal with this. And if you do find yourself in your situation, remove yourself from that situation prior to having to use your weapon. And so I completely agree with everything you guys have been saying. But we have to be aware of where we are at all times, especially. And I don't mean to create a large amount of suspicion, but I do mean to create a large amount of suspicion. Because the world is that... Well, I mean, it's true, is it not? The world is that crazy. At least it can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I'm certainly not going to go to the bad side of town, with my weapon on my hand, with a wad of cash in my pocket, with my Make America Great Again cap on. There's just certain things, you just don't poke that bear. And so I appreciate you guys. You have no idea how much I appreciate you guys popping by and talking about this. Beth, let's start with you. Great book, Women's Fundamentals, but as Greg pointed out, very applicable to men as well. But tell how we can find out more about your organization. Your book is up on the website, heartofamerica.net. People can get it right there. But if they want to find out more about you and your organization, where can they learn more?
Yeah, you can definitely go to USCCA's website. That's the United States Concealed Carry Association, if anyone didn't know, and that's usconcealedcarry.com. But I also say, hey, come pop by Facebook and find me at Pacifiers and Peacemakers with Beth Alcazar. I'd love to interact with the listeners.
Well, you and I are also friends on Facebook, Beth, and I got to say, some of your personal page posts are quite amusing. You definitely have a way with words and a way to communicate, because I love the family stuff, the stuff about the dogs, all that kind of stuff. It's absolutely hysterical. Beth, thank you so much for popping by today, and I definitely want to be able to call on you again. Well, thank you. It was an absolute joy. Greg, tell us how we can find out more about A Time to Kill.
Yes, the Time to Kill also has 3 chapters on the Bible and the death penalty. So if you want to know how God feels about that, and you might end up on a jury someday, you want to be informed on that. As I say, I spent 40 years teaching the Bible, and I have 30 years now as a licensed attorney. I do expert witnessing. I was in Clarksville, Tennessee, helping defend an off-duty sheriff's deputy in a case just last Tuesday. But I train. My main job is training these folks that need and want to know the law, especially church teams. You can contact me on email at hopkins_Greg@comcast.net if you'd like me to come speak to your church leadership about some training. And we now have my class for Alabama, my legal defense class. It's Alabama Legal Defense Academy, is now on video and online, and you can order it at www.alabamallegaldefense.com. You can also order the book from there as well.
Very good. And Dan, wonderful, several books that you've written, a couple books you've written right now, and you always create such a great narrative. And we want people to understand that we really do think these issues through. If you're compelled or you're so compelled to want to defend your right to carry and change people's minds about our right to carry, we're not trying to sell people on carrying a gun. The last thing I want out there is somebody carrying a weapon that doesn't want to carry a weapon. But for those that love to convert people and to teach people and to train people and at least to get them to thinking a little bit more, how can folks find out more about you and your books?
Well, first of all, thanks, Beth and Greg. They're good friends and top of the heap. These two they really know what they're talking about. I'm honored to know all you guys and honored to be here with you today. So thank you. And the book is Good Gun, Bad Guy, and the title is for a very specific reason. They can get Good Gun, Bad Guy or Good Gun, Bad Guy 2 at goodgunbadguy.net or goodgunbadguy.com, or they can search Good Gun, Bad Guy on Amazon. Did you notice how many times I said Good Gun, Bad Guy?
I did. You're turning into quite the marketer. Well, it's been a blast, guys, and we definitely are going to do it again. As a matter of fact, we're probably going to create a standalone podcast that will deal with just these issues, not just situational, not just active shooter situations, but a whole host of different things that we need to be aware of, how to respond in automobile accidents, first aid, thing of that nature. The trust behind this was the original Situational Security Summit that we did in Alabama some years ago. But I think we need to take this message across the land, because you guys made some wonderful points today about not just pacifism, but the fact that you don't have to draw your weapon, remove yourself from the situation, that you don't have to be a hero. You have to know the law, and you have to know what the Constitution says. But similarly, you need the right training, not just how to aim the gun, but when to aim the gun and what you can do to keep from aiming the gun. And I cannot tell you three how much I appreciate you, Beth Alcazar, Greg Hopkins, and Dan Walsh. Thank you all so much for doing this today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a privilege.
Well, it's been my privilege. We'll be back on the other side, gang. Going to take a real quick break, mop up this particular program you've been listening to, The Michael Hart Show. We're a little bit late on time, so we're going to jump right into it. Y'all stick around. Got about 20 minutes to go.
Your home's crawl space making your... Let Alabama Water Management inspect your crawl space today. A wet, moldy crawl space can cause serious foundation problems. They are breeding grounds for disgusting odors, polluted air, potentially harmful allergens, and volatile organic compounds that can actually make breathing difficult and the air in your home very unhealthy. Don't take chances with your family's health. If your home has a crawl space, call Alabama Water Management today for a no-cost, no-obligation crawl space inspection.
Find Alabama Water Management on Facebook or on their website at ALAH2O.com. The Land Report, the magazine for the American landowner, is a proud supporter of the Michael Hart Show. Currently, they're offering an exclusive subscription price for listeners of the Michael Hart Show. So click on the subscribe button on landreport.com and enter the code HARTSHOW at checkout and receive a 1-year discount on America's #1 land magazine. You'll get a full year of the Land Report, which normally goes for $59, for only $15. That's a 75% savings off the cover price. Again, that's promo code HARTSHOW at checkout of thelandreport.com, and make sure to check out The Land Report on Facebook if you love land.
Anyone can tell you the news.
We welcome Diamond and Silk.
Mark Zuckerberg will end up and it's going to be a face without the book. Book without the case.
Hey, Megan, how are you?
Now they're chipping away at the normalization of pedophilia, and the left is embracing this type of behavior.
We welcome Dinesh D'Souza.
I know I ticked him off. In a certain sense, it's a giant up yours to Obama, and that's why the left is freaking out over it.
Jack Kennedy and LBJ, Clinton, and the double standard from the left.
Yeah, I love how the left does nothing but push the most bizarre practices down our throats and up our tailpipes.
It takes a real man to tackle the hot issues that really matter.
Michael Hart is the man of this house.
Welcome to the Michael Hart Show.
Hey, welcome back. About 2 minutes past the hour. Big thank you to Beth, Alcazar, and Gregory Hopkins for popping by today, talking about guns. Maybe it's something that you can share with those that are so opposed to you carrying a weapon. And I'm so delighted that one of the things that we talked about today, and all three of them seem to agree upon, is the fact that when you're in these situations, remove yourself from the situation first. That should be your first line of defense. You don't have to be a hero. People out there that don't carry guns think that we're all looking for, a fight or a dust up. It's just not true. We carry because we want to protect ourselves and our family first. And if we can do that by getting away from the situation, that's what we're going to do. If that is the only option, or not, if the only option is to draw down, then that's exactly what we're going to have to do. But, the emotional training that goes into it, the desire to not just be able to aim your weapon true, but aim your weapon with the understanding that, we can talk about these kind of events all day long. But until you actually experience them firsthand, you're in that situation. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this today, because as far as what happened in Alabama, that had disaster, tragedy, and it was tragic, but I'm talking continued tragedy written all over it. One other person discharges a weapon from a different point in that mall, and we have the possibility of a full-fledged gun battle on our hands. We have no idea how that might have ended up. Now, the department, the Hoover Police Department has said, ALEA, the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, has gotten the videos from the mall shooting, and they are supposed to release them in the next day or so. Hoover has said if they don't, they will. And so we'll get hopefully some answers on this in the very near future. Last night I was on Outspoken with Joe Lockett. I think we hit some points right between the eyes about what is going to happen with this, how unfortunate it was, but what the response needs to be. I'm not going to elaborate on that any further than that, but Joe's program is on Alabama Cable Network every single Monday through Friday. Local time is 6 p.m. Check it out. He's got a great lineup and some great insights, because there's a lot of things that we need to be talking about in this country, not just situational awareness, not just ways to defend ourselves, but ways that we can find solutions, get past the political rhetoric and find solutions to these problems. Because some of the rhetoric has gotten just daffy. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is bigoted and seriously problematic. Yep. That's from a report in the Huffington Post. The Huffington Post news site was lambasted by saying that Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was seriously problematic over claims that it features sexism and bullying. Viewers are noticing that the story may not be so jolly after all. Oh, my gosh. Rescue me from LL Bean. Beetlejuice line. If you didn't see it, it doesn't make any sense. Among the observations was the suggestion that Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was a story about, wait for it, racism and homophobia, while calling Santa Claus abusive and bigoted. Yeah. Yearly reminder that hashtag Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is a parable on racism and homophobia with Santa as a bigoted, exploitative, well, I'm not even going to read that word, read one comment by the Huffington Post. Santa's operation is an HR nightmare and in serious need of diversity and inclusion training. Yeah. Okay. The video also suggests that it was problematic that Rudolph's father verbally abused him by forcing him to wear a fake nose to be accepted by others. Some social media critics also said the cartoon is sexist because Rudolph's mom was snubbed after she wanted to help her reindeer husband, Donner, to search for their son after he goes missing. No, this is man's work, Donner says. Folks, I'm not making this up. I need to invest in a ball pit. You know, I can do the show jumping through balls or in a safe space or I don't know. What else can we do? Because I'm maybe looking out my window, I can see the sidewalk of the street that I live on. Maybe when I get off the air today in about 10 minutes, I'll run up there and write MAGA on the sidewalk and see if people run away. Maybe to keep the Jehovah's Witnesses moving past my house. Oh, that was so rude. Yeah. The Huffington Post's effort to highlight the perceived bigotry of the movie has attracted tens of thousands of negative comments, most of them mocking the video, not the Rudolph video, but the video by the Huffington Post. Oh, look, something people like and enjoy. Let's go ruin it, tweeted a young lady by the name Rebecca. If you try hard enough, you can find offense in almost anything, Chloe Wesley tweeted and seconded. Others pointed out that the Huffington Post misunderstood the cartoon as the troubling characters learned their lesson in the end. But the bigoted characters learned that they were wrong. It's a teaching moment. It doesn't endorse the problematic stuff. This, according to one Twitter user, Robbie. Even President Trump's son, Jr., weighed in on the topic, tweeting, liberalism is a disease. Remember last week we talked about how a Charlie Brown Christmas was, or Charlie Brown Thanksgiving was racist. They explained to you the underpinnings of that, and that it was actually Charles Schultz was the impetus for the desegregation of animated features because of his addition of Franklin, the black character in the Peanut strip. But that was lost on the left as well. So now, ladies and gentlemen, those of you that are moms and dads, maybe you're in your 30s and 40s and you enjoyed Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer as a holiday classic. If you're my age, although I don't yet have grandchildren, I am certainly of the grandfather generation. Grew up with this storied classic all throughout the course of my childhood. Watched it with my children as well. So as you bunch of racist, bigoted, misogynist, bullying, loving Americans, well, when you get ready to watch these cartoons with your kid, just remember that you are a low life for supporting this kind of animated animosity. We're going to take a real quick break and come back on the other side. You're listening to a Friday edition of the Michael Hart Show here on the Hart of America Talk Radio Network. Stick around. We're coming right back.
Is your home's crawl space making your... Let Alabama Water Management inspect your crawl space today. A wet, moldy crawl space can cause serious foundation problems. They are breeding grounds for disgusting odors, polluted air, potentially harmful allergens, and volatile organic compounds that can actually make breathing difficult and the air in your home very unhealthy. Don't take chances with your family's health. If your home has a crawl space, call Alabama Water Management today for a no-cost, no-obligation crawl space inspection.
Find Alabama Water Management on Facebook or on their website at ALAH2O.com. If you're a fan of The Michael Hart Show and are enjoying the daily commentary, interviews, and audio shorts, then please consider supporting the program financially. Creating a daily talk program takes a great deal of time and money. Although corporate sponsors are always welcome, the real support comes from people like you, the regular listeners. So if you support the Christian conservative message and values we share on this program and would like to help, please go to our website, michaelhartshow.com, and click on the orange Patreon button at the top of the page. For less than $7 a month, you can help us keep going while we spread our faith-based conservative views worldwide. So if you support our views, please consider supporting the program. Just go to www.michaelhartshow.com and click on the orange Patreon button, and thanks for your support and for listening.
None shall pass. What? None shall pass.
I command you, as King of the Britons, to stand aside.
I move for
The Michael Hart Show.
You make me sad.
Almost every family has that one person. Now, not your drunk uncle. We got those too. But that one person, and maybe they're not in your family, maybe they're in your extended friends. Remember the SNL skit back in the days when SNL was a little bit funnier? A little funny? Doug and Wendy Weiner. Or Doug and Wendy Weiner. Everything they did was a downer. Every party they went to was ruined. Every time they got around to a situation, a social situation, they just brought the room down. There was that perpetual cloud. Almost like, Pigpen in the Peanut Strip. Liberals are like that too. I swear they would ruin ice cream on a spring day watching a deer drink from a brook. Now, is there bullying in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer? Actually, there is. But the whole point of the movie, the animated short, is to counter that. Also, you have to bear in mind, in the case of Donner telling the missus to stand down because this is men's work, I personally find that to be a little chivalrous. There's not nearly enough men out there taking care of the women folk. They lived in the North Pole. There was the possibility that the abominable was going to kill them. He almost got Eichhorn Cornelius and Rudolph and Clarice. Why in the world would Donner ever put the missus in harm's way? He was being gentlemanly and chivalrous. But no, apparently, he was being misogynistic. There's not a chance in the world. If I have a relative that is trapped on a mountainside or floating down a rapid stream or missing in a gunfight, I'm going to take my wife with me to go search for that person. I love her and respect her too much to put her in harm's way. And this is exactly, yet again, proof positive that really and truly, and this is not my opinion, by the way, gang, liberals really are wired differently. They, we spend so much time trying to convince them and convert them. And I've had this conversation with my friend Gina Loudon so many times, because Gina and I disagree on this. She's written books. She's been at the White House. She's been on Air Force One the last couple of weeks. She's hanging out at Mar-a-Lago. I love the woman dearly. I truly do. Been friends for years. But she is all about converting people from liberal viewpoints to conservatism. I have lost the fascination with wanting to do that years ago. And the reason is you can't fix, let's just not go Ron White today, but you can't fix uninformed. They really do think. They process things differently. Going back to the situational security debate or conference or show that we had today, the fact that they think that the gun narrative or that anything that any of our guests had written was to try to sell them on the idea of gun ownership, where nothing could be further from the truth. We just want you to respect our right to do it and understand that we really do talk about these things. We really do pay attention to them. We really are concerned about them. But that doesn't seem to permeate the very unintellectual thoughts or the emotional thoughts that so many people on the left lay claim to and hold dear. So now enter a Charlie Brown's Thanksgiving. Now Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Mark my words, you want some good money? You want some smart money on it? Charlie Brown's Christmas coming up next. And there will likely be others. Oh, and the ostracization of the Grinch. He was so ostracized. He ends up becoming heroic in the end, but he was bullied by a capitalistic culture. Those smug people. Little Cindy Lou Who, she represented the capitalist muck that would bring down an otherwise anguished Grinch. Yes, those Who's. Damn those Who's! Good grief. Liberals, take my advice. Go out and have yourself a drink. Or do whatever it is you have to do. But you definitely got to take a bath, because you have got to get over some of your angst and your consternation. As entertaining as it is to us on the right, you're going to do yourself an intellectual injury. And that's one of the reasons I'm not concerned about converting you to conservatism, but just letting you know that it's going to be all right. Trust me, it's going to be okay. That's it for us. That's it for Friday. That's it for the week. Y'all go check out the heartofamerica.net website. It's brand new. Go look at it. It's an open house today. Go visit it just to see what we've created for you over there. And thank you to Talia Williams for doing that. Go over to the shop tab. On the very top, you'll see Unknown America. The Unknown America is right there. So is Beth's book. So is Dan's book. So is Greg's book. There's going to be other books that come in as well. We're working very hard to create a great interactive website for you. Also to be able to have a landing pad for The Unknown America, the podcast, as well as whatever we decide to name the future podcast, the Situational Security Podcast, that's going to cover a whole host of other issues. So go check that out. Pick up a copy of the book. Those books are fantastic stuff. And if you are a Christian, constitutional lover of our gun rights in this nation, all three of those books, particularly if there's a young lady in your life, would make great, great, great Christmas gifts over at theunknownamerica.com, theunknownamerica.com. You can get a copy of the Constitution, and I'll even I'll personalize the books for you if you want to use those as Christmas gifts, and we've even deeply discounted them as well. That's it for us. Thank you so much, guys, for popping by today. We're back with you Monday at 8. You've been listening to The Michael Hart Show right here on the, Hart of America Talk Radio Network. We'll talk to you Monday. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and hopefully your team will win also. We'll be back with you Monday at 8. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.